The Straight Red Card is sponsored by Roughneck Scarves. Visit Roughneck Scarves for your supporters' gear from Seattle, Portland, New York, to the Philadelphia Union, and anything MLS to the English Premier League. Visit Roughneck Scarves at roughneckscarves.com. Welcome to the Straight Red Card, and today we have with us the illustrious Bill Archer. Bill, thanks for joining us once again here on the Straight Red Card.
Oh, guys, it's my pleasure. I love being here.
Well, we're loving having you back.
Believe that? Oh, absolutely.
No. Well,
we'll believe anything you say.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We need to believe that, Bill. Okay, before we get started, because we're going to cover this whole mess that has been going on in FIFA that you've been writing about so prolifically for, it's been weeks now. And we're just going to try to paint a picture and maybe answer some questions that maybe people have, like me, because I have questions that you might have an opinion on.
I mean, I don't have all. I'll do what I can, but I have a million. I could sit down and ask Chuck Blazer like 50 questions, and there's so much I'd like to know. But go ahead.
Yeah,
give it a shot.
Wouldn't it be great to have Chuck on the show with us while we talked about this? Yeah, well, someday, But
the funny thing about Chuck was that Chuck was the reclusive guy. Nobody knew who Chuck was. The first time, I think we mentioned this once before, the first time I wrote about Chuck Blazer was about 3 years ago. I'd never heard of the guy.
Yeah.
I stumbled across his name and said, "What? There's an American on FIFA's executive committee? What the hell is this?" And I dug around. I found one picture online. It's all I could find of him. In fact, he was arm wrestling with Pele. It was just this weird picture. It's true. And so I put that in the thing, and I made some crack about him looking like, either Jerry Garcia's deadbeat brother or, Santa's bad seed brother, biker claws. Yeah. I mean, I just railed on the guy and whatever, but he really made, and he's been he's one of the 24 people who run world soccer, and up until about 6 months ago, he never talked to anybody. He never gave an interview. He never did, and now all of a sudden he's subject number one in world soccer. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It's great.
You're gonna have to find that picture, I have to say.
No. I will put it up for you.
Yeah, because I think we have one with him.
It's hilarious.
With a parrot on his shoulder. That's the best we can do.
That is his parrot Max, and that is everybody who goes to his office has to pay homage to Max, who apparently sits in the corner and squawks if you don't talk to him. But that bird lives in the CONCACAF offices in Trump Tower on 7th Avenue in New York.
Wow. Well, glad they didn't. They didn't shut the offices down. Max would have been.
More importantly, I'd like to know what that bird has heard over the years.
Yeah. The fly on the wall, bird on the wall. All right.
Yep.
All right. Well, let me get this straight though, because we start off with Chuck Blazer, who is our, rather, I don't want to frame him as a hero, but he announces, and this is how this whole thing starts, or in some way he releases or announces that he suspects there's some sort of fraud or illegality by Jack Warner and others, and that's kind of how this all got started. And but Bill, what do we know exactly about what Blazer is exactly accusing Warner of? I mean, we have a basic idea, but do you have maybe a clearer idea now of what Blazer is charging Warner and others of doing?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure at the beginning Chuck even necessarily knew. And again, this is like trying to figure out what's going on in the Kremlin back in the 70s. I mean, there's so much you don't know. What we know is this. Chuck was sitting, they were going to hold this meeting. They held the CONCACAF meetings.
Right.
And in Miami. And Jack Warner told Chuck that he was going to hold the separate thing in Trinidad, in Port of Spain, and Ben Hammam was going to come, and Chuck Blazer said, "Don't do it. It's a bad idea. Nothing good will come of it." I don't know whether Warner said, I can't believe Warner said, "Oh, by the way, we're passing out envelopes full of $100 bills or anything," but it was clear that was probably, I mean, these guys aren't stupid. He clearly knew what was, probably going to happen.
Yeah.
And he warned Warner not to do it. And when it happened, and I don't know whether you saw the thing about Anton Seeley that I wrote, but and that out of all the things I've written, that's really my favorite piece of thing I'm happiest about. But because it's positive, it's you get you sit around and talk about what slime bags all these guys are, and you come across a guy who really went balls to the wall. Jack Warner doesn't fool around. Jack Warner crushes people. Jack Warner destroys careers. Jack Warner destroys lives. He's an evil man.
Yeah.
And the kind of balls it takes for a guy like Anton Seeley to stand up and say no. I mean, that's incredible. But so the whole thing happened, and Seeley calls Chuck Blazer, who's still in New York, and Blazer was faced with a problem. Blazer can say, Anton, that's our boy, Jack, and blah blah blah. I'm sure you're exaggerating. We'll talk about it later. And instead, Chuck says, I have an obligation, according to FIFA rules, that if I have heard about this kind of thing, that I have to report it. So he picked up the phone and called Jerome Valka, who's the Secretary General of FIFA in Zurich, and Jerome Valka told him to look into it. And that's how the whole thing started. I'm not sure at that time that Chuck really understood or grasped it completely, the depth of what was going on. And it was only after, John Collins talked to some people and some other people came forward. The Cayman Islands came forward. Bermuda came forward. Puerto Rico didn't come forward until later. And I understand there are a couple more now, but those were the ones who came up first.
Right.
But I'm just not sure that even Chuck knew what had happened until Collins put this thing together, at which point he has no choice but to forward it to Zurich. And I've read several places that, this was a pre-election ploy by Sepp Blatter and stuff, and I don't think so. Number one, because it's not Sepp Blatter's history. He's not that bright. His history is he uses a sledgehammer. I mean, he pounds you. He stonewalls and he beats you up. But this sort of Machiavellian, arcane plotting kind of thing, it's not really his thing. And it would take some serious thinking and some serious planning to work something out like this. And I just don't think it is. I think it really just sort of happened, and it happened because Jack Warner doesn't think that anybody can hurt him, and I don't think he still does. I think Jack Warner's still sitting down in Trinidad thinking this is going to blow over.
Yeah.
Honestly, I do. I know that sounds incredible, but I really think he thinks.
My question here, Bill, is, and this is maybe, where people kind of suspect Blatter or maybe some sort of inner weird workings, because after the accusation, Jack Warner is obviously in a bit of trouble with FIFA, no doubt about that. But then Blatter momentarily loses his presidency, or whatever you want to call it, just long enough so one of Jack Warner's best Caribbean buddies, Lyle Austin, can step in to, kind of squash Chuck Blazer's accusations and, of course, issue him the pink slip. And my question is, at what point? Why did Blatter relinquish his role there? And that's what people are asking.
He didn't have a lot of choice. That is the mandatory procedure is, and it seems strange. I'm not sure I'm familiar with anything exactly like it anywhere. But as soon as the ethics committee starts looking at you, you're immediately suspended. And the way it happens is because there are only 24 people who can bring any kind of an investigation just on their say-so, and that's the executive committee, and they don't do it. So, it's not like you and I wrote them a letter and they say, well, let's suspend Sepp Blatter while we look into it, or, Anton Seeley or Sunil Gulati or anybody else cannot do that. They can't, maybe they'll look into something, but they won't suspend you. But if someone from the executive committee says, you need to look into this, you get suspended. And it's a fascinating quirk in the rules, and I don't know why they did that. But in this case, it worked. Frankly, it worked out to Blatter's advantage in the long run because both he and Hammam were under the gun at that point, And if the ethics committee had just gone after Ben Hammam, it looked like some sort of vendetta. Like it really did look like some kind of a political move.
Right.
But because they went and looked at both of them, although in fact the latter accusations were ridiculous, but
that's what
but you mentioned Lyle Austin. Is there a bigger stooge-looking guy in the world? Jeez. Talk about looking terrible.
Yeah. I mean that really stank. That was the one thing that really stood out to me was this guy gets, the gavel for a second, and he's immediately, and God, doesn't this guy at least know the basic rules, though? That's what shocked me. Surely the idiot knew that it's against FIFA rules. He couldn't fire Blazer anyhow.
Well, I timed that. I went back and looked at the timeline very carefully. It had only been like 7 hours since Warner had been suspended when Austin started this stuff. Something like 7 hours. It was like, whoa.
Yeah.
And again, you have to suspect that Jack Warner was behind it, but the thing that he missed was maybe if Chuck Blazer was just the general secretary of CONCACAF, maybe you can bully him out of the office, maybe you can, but he's a member of the executive committee.
Yep.
And nothing made that point better than on Wednesday morning when there are 24 people sitting in the front of the room of the FIFA Congress, and Chuck Blazer's one of them, and Sepp Blatter walks by and pats him on the shoulder, and they have some charming words together and stuff. This is a big shot. Lyle Austin can no more fire him or shove him around than he can flap his wings and fly to the moon. It just is not,
Yeah.
And why in the world? It's one of the things. It's one of the unanswered questions. Why he thought he could bluff Chuck Blazer? Did he really think Chuck Blazer was going to say, "Oh, well, Lyle Austin says I need to vacate the office"? Okay, fine. Let's pack up. Let's get me a printer paper box, and I'll empty my desk, and I'll hit the street. Did he really think that was going to happen?
Yeah.
Did he really have some, or did he think, in fact, did he think at all? I don't know.
Yeah,
that's an excellent question.
Yeah, it's like a massive power grab gone horribly wrong, but at the same time, and it's not like Blazer cared what they said because he stayed in the office at USSF, and they wrote a response, as you mentioned in your article, hey, we're not going anywhere, this is illegal, yet Austin still had the gumption to shoot off a letter that you printed or published for all to see, that basically he was saying, you know what, I may not have the power to fire you, but you still use FIFA equipment illegally. I mean, how big of balls does this guy have, Lyle Austin?
I read a book years ago called Coup d'Etat, and it was written by some political science people and some government people and some military people, and basically was a blueprint for taking over a country. I mean, not like the United States; it's a little too complicated, but a smaller country.
Banana Republic, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And the point that they stressed over and over again is hour one, day one, minute one, you get control of the means of communication. You get control of the TV, you control the radio, you control the newspapers. If you don't control that, you control nothing.
Right.
And all those people in New York who run the website, who do, all the media people, they work for Chuck Blazer. He hired them.
Yeah.
And here's Lyle Austin sitting in you reminded me of Hitler in the bunker, writing ridiculous orders for people that basically didn't exist anymore. And that's what he's just sitting there writing ridiculous stuff. Chuck Blazer controlled the website. He controlled, he had total control of the means of communication, and he used it, and he made Lyle Austin look ridiculous. He really, and he couldn't have played it better. Say what you want about Blazer, and I've said plenty over the years. I have not been complimentary to the guy, but he has been nothing short of brilliant. I mean, yesterday, the day before, whatever, the comment about how the only American thing about all this is those $100 bills that they were passing out. Oh, what a great line! What a tremendous line!
Yeah.
He has played this brilliantly.